Fourth Watch starts now.
Now, tonight we approach some very controversial views in the realms of Christian research, prophecy, history, and science, all of which seem to heavily pertain to the study of Planet X. And in this particular episode, there will definitely be some things stated tonight that will not be endorsed by the Fourth Watch Radio Network or its hosts. Our guest tonight has a lot of interesting research and theories that he's going to share with us. And most of you are truth seekers, so I wanted to have Gill Broussard on to share his views. While I strongly agree that Planet X will play a role in end times prophecy, I don't land on all of the same conclusions as Gill, whether it be eschatology or related to interpretation of Scripture. Also, you will be hearing some potential date windows for Planet X activity in tonight's discussion, which I cannot support based on my research, but you can pray and study and see where you land personally on the matter. But beyond the potential dates that Gill mentions, the information pertaining to Planet X is absolutely fascinating, and it's definitely worth looking into. So that's the disclaimer, and we're giving Gill an open platform to share his research and views tonight. You don't have to agree on everything, but I can promise you this, that you are going to hear some interesting ideas tonight that will at the very least cause you to think and study deeper. So with that said, let's go ahead and welcome on Gill Broussard of Planet-7X.net. Gill, welcome to the Fourth Watch. How are you tonight?
Oh, great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I tell you something, Gill, a while back, somebody had turned me on to some of your graphics. You've put together some really amazing timelines and graphics.
Yes, I try to separate and give the facts, and a lot of people say the biblical scriptures are not factually based and that there's no scientific information there, but I think I proved that clearly that there is plenty of scientific information, because there's no way that they knew orbital mechanics or Kepler's laws of planetary motion or the subject that we're about to cover tonight.
You know, I just got done watching some stuff that you had put out before our interview, and I'm kind of like wanting to jump into this, and I don't usually do this. This is kind of out of character for me. You talk about here, you've got stamped at the end of the timeline, 2013 to 2021.
Right.
And you've got a picture here on the timeline. It says Revelation, sealed number 6 and number 7. Now, you and I agree that Planet X is going to have a significant role in the last days. You've mentioned it earlier. We've talked about it on the phone. I don't know if this is a good starting point for this segment, but you mentioned a third of the Earth's crust, and this is North and South America. By doing the math, we find out that North and South America make up 1/3 of the Earth's crust. Now, break down the prophecy surrounding that. And I'm sorry for throwing a curveball. I know we're going against the grain of what we talked about previously, but I'm kind of chomping at the bit right now.
Well, Seal 6 and Seal 7 is talking about fiery hail. That's their way of saying a meteor shower. Fiery dragon is also an ancient term talking about a comet-like object. Well, the Middle East astronomers also called it a fiery dragon, and it was a comet-like object. They call it the guest star as well. This object is a cross, like a crossbeam between a planet and a comet. But we never heard of such a comet being this large. So this is a new category for something to be 5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth and have these characteristics. The orbital path that the Asian astronomers show us, it says it's a straight elliptical orbital path. It's it's an elongated path. It crosses the Earth path twice. And where the crossing points and the exit points, the entry and exit, are roughly 5 months apart. Well, in Revelation, it says when the first meteor shower starts, that they wish death for 5 months before death comes. That's the second meteor shower. It says that 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the grass. Later, it mentions 1/3 of the rivers. Well, it didn't mention oceans. It's rivers of fresh water. They didn't have a word for continental crust, but they just described continental crust. Now, scientifically, only half of the globe can face a meteor shower. You have half the globe in daylight, and you got half the globe in nighttime as it's going through space at any given time. Only half of this globe is going to be hit with a meteor shower, which is the daylight side. 5 months later, it's the nighttime side of Earth that is hit. Well, what half of the Earth is 1/3 of the continental crust? North and South America. Asia, Europe, Africa, that's 2/3 of the continental crust. How is it that they guessed the correct percentage of crust on the side of Earth if America wasn't discovered yet? How is it that they were able to say and understand that it's only half of the Earth? Remember, Yeshua comes back mid of night. Jerusalem is exactly opposite side of the Earth, and he comes mid of night. The meteor shower is on the daylight side in March. Jerusalem is in the nighttime side. How they understood this type of model? There's many factors that go beyond their present knowledge at the time, and there's no way they could have got this right to match the orbital mechanics that we know now and have a viewpoint from space, like a satellite view. There's only a satellite view that you could have seen that this was 1/3 of the continental crust. And they got the exact sequences correct on what you would expect in the model as well.
Now, you mentioned March.
March, April. It's Passover time, yeah.
March, April. We're talking right around the corner from where we are as people are hearing this show.
Well, the scriptures also qualify it appears to be a astronomical event that talks about, it says the moon at the foot of the woman. Well, if it says moon, what are we looking at? In the heavens. What woman is in the heavens? Virgo. And does the moon come at her foot? Yes, every big once in a while it will land towards her. But it says that she's pregnant. She has a crown of 12 stars. Well, Leo is often drawn with 11, and that's qualified in Joseph of Egypt. Remember when he had a dream? It said the sun, moon, and stars of 11 stars bowed to him. He was age 17. Well, I can prove to you that the skies literally bowed to him at age 40 when he was in Egypt. We have archaeological artifacts that qualifies that this story literally happened. Well, it's qualifying an event here. The 12 stars are a crown of 12 stars is often that comment is often associated with the 12 signs of the zodiac, what's called today. And that time was the 12 signs of the Mezarah. The zodiac and the Mezarah is 180 degrees apart on how to read it. The occult version of the zodiac, you read it from the daytime skies. The Mezarah of the Hebrews, you read it from the nighttime skies. And it says she's pregnant. Well, there's one planet called the King Planet, which was also there signifying either the conception or the birth of Yeshua, which was, the King Planet was Jupiter. But there's only one time it's in the belly of Virgo at a nighttime with the moon at her foot. It greatly concerns me. I'm not saying this is going to be the day. I'm saying we need to pay attention. The Bible says for you to look for it. It doesn't say someone's going to, in other words, it is implying we'll have a short notice, a short window of its approach. It does not qualify that we'd have a normal 16 years of knowing this. It's qualifying it that there'll be a short notice.
Now, where would we be? And I know you and I talked about this on the phone the other day, but looking here at your timeline, you've got 2013 to 2021. Can you explain that a little bit for everybody? Why those years? How do we land on 2013 to 2021, and the significance of the dates and the amount of years there?
The orbital timeline for this object, it has an erratic. It doesn't come across in a timely fashion. Most of the time, it does. It's within a few years of each other. But depending on what it passed near, like if it passes near Jupiter or one of the planets, it may have an effect on it. If it ran into Ceres just before the Exodus. That's why Ceres is now the asteroid belt. It's a destroyed planet. Our Planet X collided with it. It changed its forward speed to 1/20th. Okay? So instead of the 3 hours of darkness like we had during Yeshua's time, we had 3 days of darkness during the Exodus because it was moving at 1/20th its normal speed. Then it took 4 times around the sun before it regained its normal speed of roughly 360 years. And that shows up in the timeline. After the Exodus was Joshua's long day. It was only 55 years later. After Joshua, it was Job's trouble and the drought of Ruth, which is roughly 115 years later. And after that, it was King David, where they had 3.5 year drought on Saul, 3.5 year drought on David. And this happened exactly when David and Saul was arguing. This planet passed, which is now called the Star of David, which is 303 years later. Then we come back to its normal, roughly, it was 358 years later. You got the event of Hezekiah, where the shadow goes backwards on steps. And this is where it took 4 times around the sun before it regained its normal orbit. It roughly has about a 360 to 380 year cycle. So that's why I give a range of years of 2013 to 2021. But the most likely time period biblically is the following March after a Sabbath year or Jubilee, or March, April. I'm looking at a Passover event. Because remember, a Hebrew calendar falls in between our Gregorian calendar. So it's somewhere between the last half of March and the first half of April where Passover falls. It doesn't fall necessarily on Passover. It falls near the time of Passover. And it doesn't fall that way every time. We only recognize it when Earth is passing. Remember, Earth is going around the sun. The calendar months are fixed. It's Earth that's moving through the orbital path before it becomes March. March, April, May, June. It's Earth that is moving. The calendar references on Earth's orbital path is stationary. So this planet will always exit in March, whether or not Earth is there or not. In other words, I'm telling you. Earth might be in December, but it's exiting in March or April, around the Passover time on its orbital path. It's kind of hard to explain because it's hard for people to picture that Earth is, moving and calendar is stationary. It's Earth moving. That's just like the minute hand of a watch moving through time. It's only time when the minute hand is there, but you still got all those numbers there. But same thing with the months. The months are stationary. It's Earth that is moving.
Now, you mentioned the idea of 3.5 years in getting into the cycle of Planet X.
You have a total of 7 years of drought. Remember where it says when the 2 prophets appear, one of them, Elijah, announcing the Messiah is coming? They bring with them 3.5 years of drought. That's the last half of the 7 years.
Now, if your dating is correct, and again, we're very careful with date setting. We don't date set on the Fourth Watch, but we are interested in hearing what people have to say. If your dating is correct with 2013 to 2021.
What I am saying is we have a lineup in the sky that we need to be concerned about. And it says that we'll see the warning of Jonah one, he was swallowed by the whale. The other one, it was a 40-day warning to Nineveh. Now, the text doesn't say we will actually have a 40-day warning. That's, we're kind of implying that, or at least I would, because that is what Jonah did to Nineveh, give them 40 days. And our model shows that when it's rounding the sun, it's exactly 40 days for us to be able to see it. But we may have even a much shorter event than them. We may have maybe 2 or 3 weeks notice instead of a 40-day notice. We don't know because he says you have the sign of Jonah, he says. The sign of Jonah was this planet. Now, how much time we will have as a pre-warning, I don't know. I was hoping it to at least have a minimum of 40 days. But if this is going to be a March event, then we don't have 40 days as a warning. So we have to pay attention because he says our people are not asleep, that they're watching, they're looking. But you got to know what you're watching for. And he gives us this description in the sky. So we need to pay attention.
Is there any significance with the timing of everything that we're talking about here? You're talking. There's potential for March, April. Is there any significance with the announcement that NASA just made? They came out with the announcement about the exoplanets, as they're calling it.
Well, for almost only the last 2 years or so, that they jumped on the bandwagon and are now misindoctrinating the people that it is possible for a planet to exist. Since 1992 to just 2 years ago, they were almost literally attacking people who were making the claims that there's another planet. So now they're seeding the minds of the public that it's possible, strongly possible. They say there's as many as 10 exoplanets. They think that they'll find. Well, from going from there's none to 10 now. Now, if that's not a 180-degree reversal, I don't know what is. There is strong evidence, and has been since the turn of the previous century, that there is a planet that is entering our solar system, and it's giving us effects as we're seeing today. When you look at exponential growth on the earthquakes and exponential growth on all these items, the magnetic north is moving at 12 times its normal speed. Earth's tilt is off by 4 degrees. The sun's tilt is off by 6 degrees. That's not counting some of the other planets. All the planets are warming up. What affects a magnetic field of Earth? Maybe another magnetic field?
So everything that's happening with all the planets, essentially, based on scientific method, is going to affect Earth. I mean, there's really no way of separating the two. If something's happening with the other planets, it is going to affect us on Earth. That's what you're saying, based on science.
Drastically.
And so what we're going to see here, if I'm not mistaken, and this has been my theory, that when Planet X does come into play, when we are in close proximity, we are going to be feeling the shifts or the effects. And you're saying we're already experiencing the effects with the earthquakes in diverse places, the volcano situations. Wildlife. We've got wildlife doing some very strange things. Fish are showing just whole groups of fish dying. We're seeing a lot of very strange things, which we would all agree that these are signs of the times. But you're saying that this is attributed to what's taking place in space.
Without a doubt. Look, orbital mechanics tells us an object of this size with the orbital path of what the Asian astronomers get with an entry and exit of 150 days, roughly 5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth. Kepler's laws of planetary motion tells us when it reached the edge of our solar system, Neptune or Pluto, whichever, it would take 16 years to reach the sun. Well, go back and look at what's been taking place 16 years ago and watch the elevation of all these things, from the magnetic north to the bird and fish kills to the earthquakes to the volcanoes to the strange weather patterns that we have, to the tilting of the Earth, to the tilting of the sun, to the orbital paths of planets being perturbed. There's only one item that answers all of these questions that could affect all of these realms simultaneously. If you had any one or two of these set aside, getting, kind of high, that's not a problem. But all of these, none. There's only one answer: an inbound planet.
And on the timeline, we see that this inbound planet has shown up. You're saying 14 times documented in Scripture, but you have to know how to look for it. It's not something that the average person is just going to read over and they're going to say, oh, that's Planet X. You're saying you've got to do diligence.
They didn't have modern terms like for meteor shower. They called it fiery hail. They didn't state that it was the third object, because you have to understand you can't have a double eclipse in the natural. They would call it Baal. They would call it many terms like this. Most of the pagan gods that you hear about throughout history are actually the names that they gave this inbound planet as it passed, if it came within sight. Remember, it doesn't always pass close to Earth. We found at least 3 to 4 times that it passed close to Earth, close enough to where Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. The so-called pole shift of 180 degrees, there's no evidence to prove that Earth flipped 180 degrees. The magnetic north is flipped, but not the geographic north. The geographic north has tilted 26 to 28 degrees. That's one of the reasons why you have these ice ages. Because when it tilts, it doesn't go back to its original position. It's off about, on average, 7 degrees. You see, so you have a new North Pole of about 7 degrees off from what the past is. This happened at least 3 to 4 times in the past. Because our seasonal changes are determined by the tilt of the Earth. We're closer to the sun in the wintertime than we are, at least the northern hemisphere is. We're closer to the sun in the wintertime than we are in the summertime. But why do we have cold weather? Because it has everything to do with the tilt of the Earth. The tilt is what controls your seasonal swings. Guess what? Earth tilt is changed by 4 degrees. So it gives you a warmer winter. It gives you extreme seasonal swings,
Which we're experiencing right now.
globally. Yes.
I haven't, I live in Georgia. I haven't really been around too many other places in the last few years, but I can speak for myself here. Our seasons have been completely off the chain and not in a good way. We're right now supposed to be in winter, and we'll have a 78 degree day, and then the next day it's 30 degrees. We're talking, it's unbelievable. It's causing people to get sick. It's causing allergies at an all-time high. It's messing with the wildlife. These things are undeniable. And I've been experiencing these things, Gill, for the last probably 4 or 5 years here in Georgia. The seasons are completely out of whack.
Yes.
A lot of people believe that, and this is kind of crossing over into the New Age movement, which obviously we do not support. We are very much against. But in the New Age movement, the Planet X, we'll just say, scenario, a lot of them go back to what they call the Sumerian texts. They go into this belief of Nibiru or Nibiru, however you would like to say it. They believe, a lot of the New Agers, and they're teaching this, is getting real popular, that the planet Nibiru or Planet X is actually the home planet of the Anunnaki, which I take the side that the Anunnaki were nothing more than fallen angels. Now, what are your thoughts on this? How does Planet X get connected with the fallen angels?
We get a lot of that from Stitchin. Now, one thing I want to bring out is that the cuneiform text itself, it was created roughly 2600 BC. That's only about a little bit over 200 years before the flood. And the cuneiform text also documents the flood of Cain, which obviously is a copy of it. It's not eyewitness accounts, because it's only 2600 years ago, that 2600 BC, that the cuneiform text was even created. Now, Stitchin and a lot of other people say this planet has a 3600-year orbit. and that it caused Noah's flood. Well, they missed Noah's flood about 700 years. Either they don't know how to add or subtract, or they haven't taken the time really to do proper research. So if they're already that far off and that wrong, you think they got the Anunnaki right. And I always ask people, I said, when were fictional stories created? What year did they start producing them? I said, they've always been there. When you have stories, you also will have people that will create fictional accounts. So you got to ask yourself, just because it's written, you always have that, is it a fictional account or real? Is there any data in the text that qualifies it as real, like orbital mechanics? A sequence of events that you can place a model to? The answer is no. In the Sumerian text, they don't have that.
Well, interestingly, a lot of people who have researched the writings of Sitchin, they've gotten back to the fact, or I'll just say the allegation, that he didn't actually translate the tablets, but he was involved in an automatic writing session, or we'll just say a channeling session, as he quote unquote translated. So it wasn't that he was fully familiar with the original language, but he was tapping into a demonic force, and he basically he channeled the material as he wrote it, which somehow it got stirred up to say that he was translating. But nonetheless, in an event where somebody is channeling demons, demons are liars. We know this. Demons are liars. These entities, these dark entities, whatever you want to call them, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to lie because they're trying to chip away at the truth. So, I can look at it and say, well, if he's channeling the material, he's getting demonic information, and he's going to be selling a false narrative that goes against the word. And people think that when this Planet-X is back in, close proximity, we're going to be seeing an influx of fallen angel / alien UFO activity. That tends to be one of the popular doctrines. Do you believe there's going to be any type of strange disclosure during this time where Planet-X is approaching and getting closer?
The Bible tells us that these fallen angels are still on Earth. Now, will they create a ruse that they came from this planet? Very possible. Will I believe it? No, because the data doesn't support such a finding that this planet can support life.
Well, I don't see anything in Scripture at all promoting the idea that fallen angels were the kings of planets. I don't see it in the Bible. So, again, I'm with you. I'm not going to be deceived by this false disclosure, if you want to call it that. But I was just curious to get your take on that because of the New Age beliefs surrounding Planet-X. You said something interesting to me on the phone the other day about if the events do not start happening between March and April of 2017. Now, you have some pretty good reasons as to why you think they will happen this year, getting into the Jubilee and whatnot. But if they don't take place...
I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying we need to pay attention. It greatly concerns me. On a March or April event following a Jubilee or Sabbath year. Well, the Sabbath year is already passed. We're on the final end of the Jubilee. The Jubilee would be finished when the month of Passover starts. So this March or April, we need to pay close attention. Is there anything phenomenal that's going to happen? Because the Bible tells us we should have possibly 3 things that happened before. 1 is economic problems. 2 is a war over a quarter of the world's population, which is Western nations, which I believe that's the threat of death, terrorism, threatening a quarter of the world population, that's Western nations, and the introduction of a peace agreement. Well, this peace agreement will be struck very close to the time of the first meteor shower, within weeks or months after that. That's strange. That also follows the text in some way for Islam. When their Mahdi brings peace to the Middle East, there's a sign in the heaven showing that he is which is this planet. Remember Mecca, that big black stone that they worship in Mecca? That's a meteorite that fell from one of the times that this object passed. Remember, Islam was formed roughly 600 years after Yeshua. Well, that was around the Mayans, somewhere between Constantine and the Mayans. The Mayans had such a severe drought that it destroyed almost 90% of their population.
you've stated that you're not pushing that it's definitely going to happen. I understand that, but you do continuously reference March, April of this year. Now, while I'm not totally sold on this, nor can I promote this, but in the event that we put aside your speculative timeline here, Gill, and just look at the events based on science, not putting it into a time bubble, you're saying there's going to be two events. What exactly, and I've kind of asked this before, but break it down a little deeper. What exactly would this scenario look like when it does happen, if it happens?
On the first event in March, Earth is going to slow down by 12 hours on its axis, just like the time of Joshua's long day, because Earth is entering into the tail of this comet. And the comet is plasma. The tail of the comet is plasma. Well, it slows us down at 4.5 to 5.5% compounded hourly, where we come to a complete stop, just like a rheostat, just slowing us down. Then the target zone is going to be changed. They will predict before us slowing down that the target zone is going to be the Middle East, Jerusalem area, that side of the earth. This is the false miracle of the Mahdi, the anti-Messiah. He would because the Muslims will not be granted visas to leave their country because of the terrorist activities in SEAL 4. They're stuck in their own country. No one would give them a visa because of the terrorist issues. Then here comes this Mahdi telling them, don't worry, you won't be destroyed. I'm going to change times and laws. I'm going to change the earth by 12 hours and cause fire to fall on our enemy. Well, if you change the earth by 12 hours, that becomes North and South America. And remember where it says the ones that go underground, that's their tomb. These underground shelters are going to end up being their tomb.
I mean, you've added up some interesting points on your timeline as to why you think it will, but what if it doesn't happen this March or this April? Where does that leave us? I mean, what if it doesn't happen the way that you think it's going to happen?
The Almighty gives us a counting method of 7, okay? Every 7th year, it's a Sabbath year, and every 50th year is a Jubilee year, okay? We're looking at a March-April event following a Sabbath year or Jubilee. I checked the next 50 years, all right? There's no lineup that matches this biblical account in Revelation except for this next March. Now, is it going to happen? I can't say yes or no to that. I'm just saying paying attention. But it greatly concerns me because there's nothing in the next 50 years. So is there any other lineup that matches Revelation? None that I can find except for this coming March. Is it going to be? We'll have to wait and see. All I'm saying, it greatly concerns me because he does give us an astronomical event to look for. Now, this is not the same thing as the rapture, which is 3.5 years later, which we won't know the day or hour. We know, remember, day or hour. We know it's going to be pertaining to the last trump, which is a September event. The one that he's telling us about in Revelation is a March event or Passover event. And Elijah and Moses show up. 3.5 days later, the Messiah shows up, which is the day of the crossing of the planet. The prior 3.5 days earlier than that is when Earth is entering the plasma tail, and they have to turn off the generators globally, otherwise they'll burn up. It's like an EMP wave, so they got to turn off globally that night of Passover. The generators globally are turned off. Then Elijah and them shows up. Well, guess what? It's a private meeting. Remember, the Bible says a wicked and adulterous generation, the only sign they will get is the sign of Jonah. That's the only sign they get. Well, that means they don't hear the announcement Elijah and Moses have arrived. And why is that? Because the generators are turned off. There's no TV or radio crews or electricity in people's homes. You have an old-fashioned Passover with oil lamps and candles. 3.5 days later is when the crossing happens, and we're still in the tail, and the Messiah shows up mid of night. when everyone else is going underground and asking the rocks to cover them.
Now, here's a tough question though, and this is just if things do start happening in March or April, if we see these things happen, and there's an if, I say if there, obviously, where would that put us on the timeline of the tribulation?
CO6 is the beginning of the Great Tribulation, which is the beginning with a meteor shower, fiery hail. This would be the crossing. That would start the Great Tribulation. Tribulation is not 7 years. It's 3.5. Let me point out something that's Hebraic and more. Okay. Jacob's trouble, if you want to know how long is Jacob's trouble, you go read the story of Jacob. Remember where he had to work 7 years before he could get his first bride? And then he was tricked and he knew nothing about her. Then he had to work another 7 years for his true bride. That's Jacob's trouble. Who's against Jacob? Esau. If you go back and look at what took place 14 to 15 years ago, guess what that is? That's 2001, 9/11. Who declared war against whom? Esau declared war against Jacob, Jews and Christians. That started Jacob's trouble. So how long is Jacob's trouble? That was a Sabbath year. 2001 was Sabbath. So you can't work on that. You count starting the following year. 7 years. And guess what? After 7, that lands on 208. Did the world get a leader that they knew nothing about? And was he connected to Esau? Yes, he was. Now we have to wait another 7 years, and now we have a wild card, a Jubilee, that you have to add into the situation. We have a Sabbath and a Jubilee. Right after this Jubilee is a March-April event that lines up in the sky. How did they know this 2,000 years ago? It's odds beyond what you can calculate. Exact hour and day, and for it to line up with the story of Jacob. So that's Jacob's trouble. Jacob's trouble started in 2001. It's 2 sets of 7 plus a Jubilee. Now we're going to go into the Great Tribulation, which is 3.5, which is where he says time, and half a time. Hebrews count in times of 7, unless there's a Jubilee involved. So that time is 7 years, time 7, added a Jubilee, then half a time. And half a time is half of 7, 3.5. It says a peace agreement is drawn up for 7 years and is broken midway. That is the Battle of Armageddon. That's the last battle at the end of this 3.5 years. It's about the last 40 days of that event is going to be that battle. Remember, the peace agreement's broken midway. It never reaches the 7 years. That's why he said if he didn't cut it short, his way of telling time, which is units of 7, there'd be no life spared. Even the Muslims would kill each other. Look, there's seal 3, 4, 5, and 6 and 7. 6 and 7 is the 2 meteor showers. It's the only book that's numbered like this, with seals and stuff. It's numbered. I think the Almighty knows how to count. They're in sequential order. Seal 3, 4, and 5. 5 is the peace agreement. Islam requires a breaking of a peace agreement with a Jew or Gentile. It's in the Quran. They cannot hold to the end of an agreement of peace. They have to break it. They can only hold a peace agreement with another Muslim.
We know that the Jews are waiting on a Messiah. There's a lot of talk about this. The rabbis believe, the Jewish rabbis in Israel believe that Donald Trump is going to usher in the age of Messiah. These things are being published by Jewish publications. It's getting a lot of traction. How is this all going to fit in with the false Messiah that the current non-believing Jews are waiting on this Messiah? How is this going to tie in? Because you mentioned the Mahdi. I mean, there's got to be some kind of place where these things meet.
The 3 major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are all waiting on a Messiah. The Mahdi is their way of saying anointed one, which is the same way you say Mashiach and the same way you say Messiah. It's an anointed one. This is, all three of these have to fit together for them all to be fooled or reconciled with, okay? Watch. Take a look at this. In Islam, they're expecting a Christ lookalike to come out of the desert as a prophet. Judaism and Islam recognize Yeshua as a prophet, not as a Messiah. What does the Christianity say? Well, when they say I come out of the desert, don't go. It's not me. That's what our Christianity tells us, point blank. Why is that? Because the one who's coming out of the desert is a prophet, the false prophet. And this false prophet is going to point to a Mahdi who's a world leader and say, he is your Messiah. He's pointing to the Mahdi who's different than him. This Mahdi is a world leader. He's the anti-Messiah. The Christ lookalike is the one that's going to walk out of the desert as a prophet. In Christianity, that's the false prophet. And he's going to point to the Mahdi, say he is your Messiah. That's the false Messiah. Before a peace agreement, you have to have a war. Okay, this is what Islam is ushering in against Jews and Christians, a war against them. We're going to probably have a nuclear war in the Middle East. It'll be a short war, then peace will come. So whoever's in the middle of this peace agreement getting the glory, and it doesn't have to be Trump. Remember how past presidents have pulled other presidents out of retirement to go do, like President Carter, to go do his negotiations for peace?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Let's say that there's a strong indication right now that Obama has 32,000 instigators to go cause trouble in the streets. And we're going to have a Middle East war that takes place, and then we're going to need someone to strike a peace agreement. Well, Trump is a hardliner. Muslims are not going to give him the credit because in their Islamic faith, it's the Mahdi who gets the credit for the peace agreement. They don't want Trump there. So Trump strikes a deal with a past president. Say, look, I'll grant you amnesty, or otherwise I'm going to prosecute you for all of this violence. Go over there and finish off the deal that I started. Who's ever in the middle getting the glory for this peace agreement is our Antichrist, who happens to be the Mahdi of the Islam. And
he will also be considered the Messiah for the Jews.
That's when they start to recognize him, because right after that, he will commit a miracle that no man, but our Bible tells us it's a false miracle. And he also tells us how it's going to be done if you understand the science of the Bible. He will change laws and time. He will be the one who is declaring that he will change the Earth's rotation by 12 hours, because astronomy is going to predict that half of the Earth, the Middle East, to be hit by a meteor shower. But they don't figure the physicist model, where when Earth goes into the plasma tail, Earth will slow down by 12 hours, like it was in Joshua's long day. Earth will slow down by 12 hours again. That changes the target zone to the opposite side of Earth.
Which you believe is North and South America.
Well, give me any other part of the Bible that's 1/3 of the trees, grass, and water, fresh water, rivers, that its economics is controlling the world right now. Our Federal Reserve, which is not really ours, it's because it's not even federal, it's a private entity, and that's the seat of Babylon, New York City, with the Federal Reserve in place. It says in the end time, the whole world is Babylon, Babylonian system of financing, pharmakia, the medical, you name it, goes on and on and on and on. And we're in the end days. Now, how did they get, when you know what you're reading and you're looking at the last book of the Bible, it almost reads as if you're reading a newspaper of today. And how did they get the science right? When just in the last 15 years, physicists have promoted a plasma or electromagnetic universe, which is the correct model. Only in the last 15 years. If we tried to do these calculations for the Bible over the last 15 years, we would have failed because we've been using a gravity model. It doesn't work. But with a plasma model, it proves out the stories of these Bibles being actual historical events. Joshua's long day, the shadow going backwards on Hezekiah, the 3-hour eclipse of Yeshua, the 7-year drought of Joseph of Egypt, where the stars bowed to him, Noah's flood. You can't guess consecutively right of orbital mechanics 14 different times. It's impossible. These are real, actual events that they're documenting as historical. Your Bible is a historical document recording these events, and the Almighty is the one who brings it in at His timing to do either judgment against you or a blessing for you. Remember, this planet has wiped out armies at the exact time that they were about to invade Jerusalem. Exactly the timing that they needed. Exactly wiping out an army that Joshua is attacking that's 10 times his size. And only the enemy is hit by the meteors, the fiery hail. They're doing hand-to-hand combat with swords, but only the enemy is being hit.
Now, I know we're almost out of time here, Gill, and there's so much that I really want to go through with you on another episode. I want to go through the timeline of all these different events that are connected with Planet X. I think it's fascinating. Not everyone's going to agree with everything that you say here, but what we can take from this, regardless of where you might stand on these things, ladies and gentlemen, where I might stand on these things, Planet X has been around. It's shown its face. Not everyone's going to agree on eschatology. Not everyone's going to agree on some of the little caveats here and there. But I'll say this though, Gill. I've always believed, since I first started studying Planet X, I've always believed that it's going to play a role in the tribulation, the Great Tribulation. And, I think it's fascinating. You've done a lot more research than I have on many of these events surrounding Planet X. I know that, some things were said tonight that some people are going to have a hard time with. Some things you've said, I've got a hard time with a few of them. Unfortunately, I don't have time to research everything that you said tonight before we recorded because I didn't know all the things you were going to say. But I'm very interested. I'm going to be doing more research on this. If people want to get copies of your graphics, if they want to see your timelines, where can they find them online?
You can go to Planet-7X.net, and at the bottom of that page, there's some Dropbox and Google Drive links. And if you go to, let's say, Google Drive, I'll have different folders. When it first comes up, you can download the Planet-7X book, which is the graphic book. It's a PDF, and it shows all the graphics and some of the paragraphs of text that has the events. This is just to give you a visual. You go back and read the actual stories in the Bible with this in mind, the picture that I'm portraying, and you can see it in there. You can clearly understand the story now. It gives you the emphasis, and these are historical events.
And you're pointing out here that it's not just biblical events where this is surfaced. There's other events throughout history where other cultures have documented this. And these are the things I want to get into more with you the next time we have you on. I think it is kind of interesting. Interesting might not be the best word, but it's kind of interesting. It's rather peculiar that we just had this big announcement about the exoplanets from NASA. Again, it's kind of interesting that just took place. I'm not claiming to know what's going to happen here with Planet X in the next few months. I'm very interested to hear what you had to say, and it is timely, and so that's why I wanted to have you on to talk about this. Once again, we've been talking with Gill Broussard of Planet7X.net. I've got copies of all of Gill's materials here.
We have YouTube also, channel Planet-7X.
All right, Gill. Well, thank you very much, and you have a good night.
Good night.